Alina, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
What inspired you as a young girl and leading down the path that you are now?
I was always singing, dancing, playing the piano. You could not stop me from performing.
You started teaching in your parents' garage. So how did that come about?
I had a friend actually from school approach me and say that she really wanted to do piano lessons and thought I was the best person to teach her.
So from one, how many now in the business?
28.
How do you manage a team of 28? What's some of your tips that you could give me and whoever's listening? So today I'm very excited for Alina from Alina W Music to be joining me on the podcast. Now, I first met Alina when she was a 16-year-old when we were in a musical West Side Story together with the Blue Mountains Musical Society. And from 16-year-old, she's now grown a music school to over 300 students, which is absolutely incredible, with 2 spaces in Penrith and Springwood. And today we're going to deep dive in how did she achieve that at such a young age and why is music so important to children? So let's go and chat to Alina from Alina W Music. Alina, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm actually really excited to talk to you. And I do say this a lot from my guests, but I actually am for you. There's a reason why. And that is I've known you for a long time. We first met doing West Side Story in the BMMS. You were what, 15, 16?
Yes. I was pretty young. I can't remember. I was a teenager, but yeah, a long time ago.
You were very young.
Yeah.
And that was the first time we met. You were both in the ensemble.
Yeah.
And from there, you have just grown into this amazing business owner.
You flatter me.
No, truly. A client of mine as well. And I think today's conversation, I really want to get down to kind of, what made you decide at a very young age to go down the route of being a business owner.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to talk about. So first of all, we're going to back end a little bit to Alina and talk about, your growing up, and what inspired you as a young girl and leading down the path that you are now.
Yeah. So I was always singing, dancing, playing the piano. You could not stop me from performing. Literally from a young age, whenever we would have family members over and things like that, it was straight to the living room and I'd have some sort of performance on. At Christmas time, I would force all my cousins to go in this massive big Christmas concert where I would make a program. I would go to old family photos and chop out everyone's heads and make headshots and stick them around the walls around Nana Pa's house.
I've been there. I've done that too.
Oh my God. I was so into it from the get-go and did all the dancing, all of the competitions and the ballet exams and the singing exams and the piano exams. I was just always so hungry to be on stage. And I think for me, I was so lucky. I grew up in a family where music was just always a thing.
Yeah.
Dad played guitar. Mum grew up doing singing and playing the piano and things like that. So it was always music in the house. We were going to watch musicals. I've seen more musicals than I can count, thanks to my parents, because they just really brought music into the home. And it meant that me and my siblings all were able to have that music and dance education from a really young age.
Yeah. It's a lot when you say it like that as a young age. You're doing dancing, which, I grew up dancing and that was full on. That was 7 days a week sometimes. It was nuts. But then you throw in that you were learning an instrument at the same time. How did you balance as a kid, dance and singing and piano and all those things?
Yeah. I guess I was one of those overachiever kids, definitely. I was that one that had to be getting the straight A's at school, but was also very involved from an extracurricular perspective. I can remember having afternoons where it would be go to piano straight after school, and then I would be doing homework in the car, and then off to dancing, and then I'd do a 2-hour class, and then we'd have a dinner break, and I'd sit there doing
Non-stop.
more homework, and it was nonstop. But I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think it's a big testament to why my organizational and time management skills, I guess, are second nature as a business owner now, because as a child and a teenager growing up, I had no choice but to be organized, because if I wasn't organized, I didn't have enough time to get through everything I needed to.
That's one argument that, I hear a lot, and you probably do, in the performing arts, it teaches discipline.
Oh, absolutely.
In children, it teaches commitment.
Yeah.
It teaches how to really work towards something.
Yeah.
And I think performing arts does that over any other form of sport. You can talk about sport in general as discipline, and it absolutely is. But I think there's something about performing arts in general, not just dancing, but music and the arts in general that really, from a young age, that's what kind of one thing I really learned.
Absolutely. And there's so many transferable skills. Like we've just finished doing a whole week of piano and singing exams for our kids. And I always say to the parents, like, the exams are about skill set, but they're also about learning how to perform under stress. When are we going to do that in our everyday lives? Every time you go for a school exam, every time you go for your driving test, every time you go for a job interview, you're going to be put in these situations of pressure and having to control those nerves. And so in your performing arts training, you don't realize the transferable skills that you are developing that can be applied regardless of whether you choose to do performing arts later on down the track as an adult.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's about, learning something and committing to that end result and that end goal. Like, I don't know, I don't really remember any super duper French words in ballet, but like I remember having to learn them. I remember for the ballet exams we had to learn.
Had to know all your theory, right? Them. We had those little theory books that we'd take home with us, and
we'd be doing quizzes on the windowsill. That's what we're doing the dancing. But it was about really like striving to achieve something and working toward that goal, which it seems like that discipline has really transferred into what you do now, which we'll get to. Let's not rush ahead. So obviously, you're a young girl doing all these performing arts, and then in your teenagehood, what kind of led you? I guess first of all, you also studied law, right?
Yeah.
So we'll come back to what you just said about that you were very, what was the word that you used?
A bit of a high achiever, overachiever.
So, performing arts, and then let's be Legally Blonde at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But what was the path that you were thinking that you really wanted to take outside of high school?
Yeah. So it was a tricky one. So I was always conflicted at school because I was 1,010% the performing arts kid. Like I was the kid that was singing at every assembly and every school event. But
Not Alina again.
Yeah, I was that kid, right? And but then when it came to my studies, I couldn't help but give 110%. And I think that was where I sort of struggled to decide which way I was going to go. And I think as well, like you hear so many people saying there's no money in music, there's no work in music, there's no stability in that. If you've got the brains to go and do law, why wouldn't you go do that, right? And so I sort of gave in, but I had decided when I started uni that I would do my law with a Bachelor of Arts majoring in music.
Okay.
So that I still had like the arts element in there. But the concept at the time when I finished school was I'm going to be a performing arts lawyer. It's too tricky to work in this industry.
Right.
It's too hard to get stable work. And you always have that self-doubt of, I'm probably not good enough. I'm probably not pretty enough. I'm probably not skinny enough. All the things that sometimes get circulated around. And so I've got into law. Let's try and pair it with music and become a music and entertainment lawyer.
Still be in the performing arts world.
In the industry. But use like that legal content to assist other artists and performers and things like that. So that's where the initial thought process was. And had you asked me at 18, that's what I would have said I was doing.
Yeah, being a performing arts lawyer.
Yes, but I was teaching and I had a few students from home and things like that, and I was working at a music school like as my sort of part-time job and things like that. And I had started singing at weddings and so like at a young age I was doing those things because my parents were like, well, you're good at them and you did all your Amy B exams and things like that. So why doesn't that be your thing that you do through uni as your part-time job? You love it.
Yeah. Instead of flipping burgers or making sandwiches, why not use the skills that you have and make some money that way?
Exactly. And my parents were wonderful. We had a room on the side of our house that we transformed into my teaching space. And, the kids would come along the side of the house and to this one room that was on the side that was the music space. And for quite a few years I taught there. And it gave me my start. But once I started teaching, I was like, oh, I really like this. But I was doing a law degree and I had a job in a law firm. Like I was busy.
Yeah. Do you reckon that, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong here, like obviously straight out of high school, you went straight into a law degree and then you started teaching, which we'll get to that in a minute. But did you have self-doubt as a performer to try auditioning for professional musicals or going overseas? Like, did you try to do that? Was there a barrier that stopped you, do you think?
Yeah, I think at the time as well, I had some serious eating issues as well that had come as a result of. Well, you're in the performing arts industry. You know what it's like.
I'm an overeater. Look at me. Anyway.
Well, it's. I think as a teenager, being involved in an industry like that, I know I myself put a lot of pressure on myself to look a certain way and things like that. And so when I finished school, I was in such a bad state of mind about my own skill set, about my own body, that I think for a bit there I just went, I couldn't think of doing this full time because it had transformed from this thing that I absolutely loved as a kid to this thing that brought me so much grief and anxiety. And I just was constantly measuring the calories and, like it was just, it had transformed into something different and held a different spot in my heart. And I would be so anxious thinking about how that would continue in a full-time performing arts capacity. And I had family members saying to me, it's so tough in music, just play it safe. And I was very fortunate that I had multiple offers for law, and people were like, why would you not take that? Like, there are people that work so hard and don't get there. And I got early entry into law, So I think I played it safe. Knowing that I would still always have music in my life in some capacity because I was doing the wedding singing, because I was doing a little bit of teaching. I thought, maybe I could keep up doing some musicals with local societies. Like I could still keep that as part of my life, but not the full extent of my work. But it wasn't until I started going down that law path that I realized that wasn't going to happen. It just didn't align with me.
And look, absolutely, as someone who spent many years trying to make it as a performer and, had some success here and there, it's a very stressful period of time, and mentally you go through a lot of ups and downs. And I know I went through that as well, obviously physically as well. And, you compare yourself to so many things. And like for me as a male performer, male dancer, I was at a certain time where certain skill levels as a male dancer wasn't as important, and then all these upcoming new ones that could flip and do all these things that I couldn't do. I got to the point where I was just like, do you know what? I don't think it's for me anymore. So then, I moved into kind of this and filmmaking and stuff like that. Still keeping that creative juice alive. But look, it is a stressful thing. But I think what you said there is that you still wanted to keep that music and the performing arts alive has really, well, first of all, it's made you such a success now, and we'll get to that right now. So you mentioned that you started teaching in your parents' garage, correct?
Yeah, a little.
So how did that come about? Like, and what age did you start teaching, and what was it at first?
So it was my dad that definitely encouraged me to start, because I had because I was doing music at church and, was starting to gig and things like that. And so he was like, well, why don't you do a bit of piano teaching at home? And I had been working in a music school as well. So I'd had a little bit of experience and practice. I had a friend actually from school approach me and say that she really wanted to do piano lessons and thought I was the best person to teach her. And I was like, I don't even...
How do you teach piano?
I don't even teach piano.
I know how to do.
I know how to do. I've done a little bit of teaching work in a music school, but not on my own. I was a co-teacher. And she was like, yeah, me and my other friend, we want a piano teacher, and they lived up the road. And they're like, we'll come to you. They basically told me, you're doing this. And so I was like...
They forced your hand.
Okay. And they were my initial two. And one of my initial two had a younger sister that later on ended up learning with us and coming to the school once it was established and things like that. So one of those two families ended up being a very long-term client of mine, which is just amazing given they were in the initial lot. Because obviously when you're initially starting, it's, the product or the service that I offered then is nothing like what I offer
well, it's
now.
not really well, first of all, mentally, you don't think of it as a business.
No, of course
I don't
not.
remember my first few things. It was like, this is just a side hustle. This is this is something like, that idea of it actually being an established business is just not on the horizon.
No, of course not. And I was still a teenager, and I decided to take them on, and then my cousins heard about me starting to do some piano lessons. So then 2 of my little cousins were starting with me. So all of a sudden I've got 4 students I'm teaching a week. And then word of mouth started working in my favor. And I was like, oh, okay, there's some interest here, but I never, ever, ever in a million years thought I'm going to turn this into a music school. Like, it was just a great little way to have a flexible part-time job while I was studying.
Yeah.
And all the families that I was working with initially, they knew I was doing law. They knew I was at uni. If I had an exam on, it was like, don't worry, we'll miss this week. Like, it was so flexible. And I was cheap as chips because I was just starting out. Like, it was just a way for me to have a little bit of income to support me being a uni student. But during that time, it was building and growing, and I think I'd made a Facebook page, and I called it Alina W Music purely because my dad said, the internet's a scary place, don't put your last name on the internet. So instead of it being Alina Wakeling Music, it was Alina W Music, purely for that purpose, like no more thought than that.
Good old dad.
Good old dad with the internet safety. And so that was where the name came from. And I think I had once I had about 15 kids that had just come from word of mouth, I'd posted on my Facebook page just for my family and friends, like letting them know I was doing some piano teaching from home and doing some weddings and things like that. And so that was where the initial growth came from. But I think it was my second year of law when I'd got to about 35 kids a week at home. And my parents turned to me and said, this is starting to get bigger than we thought this was going to be because we've got people here every afternoon/evening. And the little room that I taught in was right next to our living room. So I'd have customers sitting there and my parents having dinner at night. Like, you don't have that sense of privacy and home time in the evening.
Yeah.
And so that's when they were like, maybe we need to think about what we're doing here. And I think I just got my first law firm job at that point too. So I was working a couple of days a week as a paralegal. And they're like, why don't we focus more on the paralegal stuff? Or if you're going to do the music stuff, maybe we balance it with the law stuff so that they also didn't want me to have too much on my plate at that point in time because I was going to be a lawyer. And so
you're still really young, what, 19?
Yeah. And so they were it just got to the point where it was bigger than what I anticipated it would be at home. But that sparked something inside of me where I went, maybe I could move this out of home and move this into a commercial space.
What do you think that spark was?
I just think I hate giving up on things. If I've started
Overachiever, Alina.
If I've started something, and I loved working with the kids, and some of these kids had been with me for a little while now, and you're starting to see progress and see their confidence developing and things like that.
Well, you start getting really invested, right?
Of course. And I was really enjoying it, and I was so over prepared with all my lessons. I would sit there writing individual lesson plans for each kid and looking for music for them based on what their interests were. I was really into it, and I think because I was working at the law firm at the time, and although I worked at such a fantastic law firm, I just wasn't emotionally connected to it. I enjoyed the analytical side of it. It really worked my brain.
Yeah.
But I just think emotionally it was the music education that had my heart. And so on my lunch breaks, I would walk up and down High Street and I would see what commercial spaces were available for rent. And there was one round the corner from our firm that was within budget. And I remember going upstairs to one of the other solicitors who knew about my music teaching and saying, there's this space. And she's like, you should go for it. Why not? It's just around the corner. You could still have this job during the day and teach in the afternoon. I was like, genius. I can do both. So I set out to do both. And so that wasn't the commercial space that I ended up leasing out initially. I got a different one, but it was still on High Street, and initially I was working 9 till 3 in the law firm and then teaching 3:30 till 8:30 in the commercial space just up the road. And I was doing my law degree full time, online, most of it. So I was doing my tutorials in my lunch breaks and between classes and things like that. But once we moved it into a commercial, like a proper commercial space, within 6 months, we'd hit 50 to 60 kids a week. And that's when I went, I think there's potential for this to actually go somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how that transition
Yeah.
happened.
It's really, I find when I have these chats with business owners, it's really a bit of business therapy for me, but it's also really, really cool to see how each story has happened, because there's similarities with a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
It just starts off as a hustle and then it kind of grows and grows and
Yeah.
grows. And I think for you, that growth just happened so quickly.
Yes.
So how did you emotionally and mentally prepare yourself for this explosion, really?
I think I just went with the flow and was always happy to do whatever it was that needed to be done to continue to support the growth. In those early stages, I was pushing the marketing so much. I mean, we post on socials a lot still, but in those early days, I was just posting, and every time someone would jump on a community group page and ask for recommendations for a piano or singing teacher, I was on it. I was the first person to comment. But I just was really proactive, trying to make sure my customer service from the get-go was really efficient so that I wouldn't lose leads. Like every single person that came along, I would try and make them work. I'd try and fit them into my schedule. As I said, I was doing like 60 students on my own and still had a law firm job and doing my law degree. So those initial 6 months when we first went commercial were full on. And then we went into a lockdown. And so then I lost half of those kids overnight, basically.
It's hard to do music lessons over Zoom.
We did do them over Zoom, but tricky. I do the odd Zoom lesson when kids are sick now and think, how did I do that for months? Like, how did I do that? Because often you can't even see clearly, or the audio visual quality is not great and things like that. Like, I think it really developed my ears, to be honest, because you had to listen so carefully to make sure that you capture like all the notes and be able to give them accurate feedback. And we had kids preparing for like piano and singing exams over Zoom, so you wanted them to still pass their exams and be able to give them that that same attention to detail as they would get in class. But yeah, we got through the lockdown. Luckily, a lot of those customers came back after that lockdown. And then once we came out of that, just before the lockdown, we'd actually built a dividing wall in that initial studio because it was just one big room to turn it into 2 teaching rooms. And once we came out of the lockdown, I brought my sister on and one of my senior students as additional teachers. And so at the end of that first year, we went from just me to being a team of 3, and we managed to grow to 100 kids by the end of that first year. So
crazy.
Yes.
Side note, how is it having your sister as an employee?
It's
shout out to Bernadette.
Bernie, yeah. She's absolutely wonderful. I could not have grown the business in the way I have without her, because just having someone that you trust so deeply to help support that growth. And she knew how important the business was. Like, the business is my baby. And I think like she took that on in terms of her level of commitment, and she's a wonderful teacher. She's such a wonderful teacher. She's been with us for several years now, and the kids love her, and she's always booked out because she's just, Miss Bernie is a favourite. But obviously you have your tricky moments when it's hard to separate boss and sister. And, you know, we've had our fair share of arguments about things, but no, she's been incredible, and I honestly could not do it without her. She's studying OT, and I'm going to be really sad if the time comes when she, you know, decides to spread her wings and do her own thing. Because
we won't tell her that. No.
I would love. I want to keep her
but...
forever. I want to keep her forever because she's just such a wonderful teacher and such an asset to the team. So I'm very lucky in terms of the family support. I sort of had my sister working. My brother works for us as well. He's a guitar teacher. My dad helped build all like that initial wall that we built. Like, he was in there helping. Unfortunately, he had a stroke a couple years back, so his support is still very emotionally there, but I couldn't have done that initial growth without him being like the hands-on labor guy to come in and help. And even after Dad had the stroke, we had to do a studio move, and my mum was there packing keyboards into the car with me. Like, I'm just really, really grateful. My fiance Alex is a business owner as well, and he's like, whenever I need anything, he's right there. So I think having a really good support unit around you can really transform the growth as well, because it truly does take a team of people to sort of keep that growth.
And I say this a lot, like, business can actually be quite a lonely thing. You know, like, you know, we go through so many ups and downs as a business owner, you know, whether it be lockdowns, whether it be financial, whether it be whatever it is, but it can be a bit of a lonely roller coaster.
Absolutely.
So having a good support system next to you, even if it's just emotionally there to listen and vent, I think is the most important thing I think a business owner needs, is someone to be that little Jiminy Cricket on their shoulder, kind of helping them, right? In that regards.
And there's no guidebook on how to run a business.
No.
There's no guidebook on how to grow a business.
No.
I feel like I listen to so many podcasts searching for the answers. Like, surely someone's worked it out, right?
Yeah.
But it's through listening to others' experience that you work out, okay, well, that worked for them. That didn't work for them. You know, it's experience is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So is retrospect.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, what is business studies at school? Because it doesn't teach you about running a business. That's for damn sure.
Oh my gosh. And I just think that so much is trial and error and the mistakes you make, but you learn through it. So.
Yeah, 100%. And we were talking off camera about, you know, as a business owner, you know, if something happens, like, you've got to make sure you take ownership of that problem, right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important to understand that even if maybe you physically didn't do that problem, like, as a business owner, it ultimately comes from the top down.
Oh, for sure.
So you got to. It's all those trials and errors of a business owner.
Yeah.
But what I want to ask you is, you know, you had this law was the forefront, right? Then the school kind of started happening in the background. When do you think that really shifted to where you were like, I don't want to do law anymore?
Okay, so I think once we hit 100 kids at the end of that first year of like properly going commercial, I started looking for a bigger space. And the following year we moved at the start of term 2. So we did one more term in that smaller space and then we moved. And when we did the move and we moved into a space that was far more of a financial commitment, like the rent was far more expensive, it was a far bigger space, but it allowed for so much more growth. I had told myself that because I think it was a 2-year lease, 2.5-year lease, I was going to give myself till the end of that lease to work out if this was truly something that I wanted to go through with, because it would mean that in that time I'd also finish my law degree and then I'd have to start making hard choices about which way I was going. And in order to give the music business a full good crack, I left my paralegal job and was purely just doing the degree and focusing on the business. So we moved to that new space. And I think I had done the numbers and worked out for this to be financially a good decision, we needed to get it to 200 kids a week. And I know that sounds like, oh, well, you just got to 100. Surely 200's fine. But that's doubling again.
Yeah.
And to do that, you need more staff.
But it's not also that. It's also better than how can you consistently have 200.
Correct.
Because you could get to 200 and then end of that term, you could lose 30.
Absolutely.
So how do you consistently stay at that number in order to be financially viable?
Correct. And that is where I started to learn the importance of good teachers, good systems, good training for your staff, and really having stability for your team, because in those initial stages of me having an extra couple of teachers, so that the experience was consistent across all of the teachers, regardless of whether you were learning with me or learning with one of my team members, I used to write all the lesson plans for every single child every week that came in.
Wow.
So right up until we got to about 200 kids, every week I was writing 200 lesson plans.
My goodness, Alina.
It was pure insanity. But it got to the point where I was like, this isn't efficient. We can't continue to grow like this. And so that's when I sort of systemized our lesson plan.
Yeah, but also it's like just coming in there, it's like you're working in the business and not on the business.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
how can you grow that if you're doing all the lesson plans for someone.
Yes. And it was that high achiever in me that was like, I'll just do it and I'll do it for everyone and I'll make sure that everyone has a really great lesson plan. You know, it was crazy and not sustainable. And so it was about systemizing how we do our lesson planning, systemizing our training so that the teachers all sort of viewed the teaching in the same way that I did and knew what structure I would use for those lesson plans and knew what our goals were, but also we're very big on creating well-rounded musicians, so having a good balance between your practical elements, your listening elements, and your theory elements, so that every child is developing a well-rounded skill set. But that's also when I started looking at getting like I paired up with Amplify 11, which is a local performing arts accounting firm, and Ant from Amplify 11 helped me set up some really good actual business structures for things like booking and payment, and because again I was just doing everything myself. So
Yeah.
it wasn't until I actually went, if I'm seriously serious about this business, I need systems, I need structure. Otherwise, this business is going to kill me with the amount of work I'm doing.
100%. I think any business an owner who's listened to this that takes anything from this podcast is that systems are so important in your business, because how can you sustain the growth, or how can you, achieve goals that you want if you don't have something behind you that's going to help?
Yeah.
And it took me a while to learn that as well. It took me a while to really understand, like, how can we have internal systems to review things so that quality is going out the same? How can we have systems where we're client liaisoning, or when those leads come through, how can we take those leads on a client journey, right?
Yeah.
And obviously the last thing is, how can we improve our cash flow?
Yeah.
Because cash flow in a business, if you on paper it might say, yeah, we're making this money, but if that cash is not coming in, is it actually going to come in? You know what I mean? So it's really important to have those correct systems in place in order to sustain your business.
Oh, for sure.
Because manual work is great for the start, but it does not work when you're dealing with the volume of, like, for me, obviously my volume of clients is not in the 200, 300. It's obviously a lot less, but we're dealing with, big projects and things like that. So, like, how can we make sure that everyone has that same quality control? Whereas you're dealing with hundreds of people. Yes.
And that systems, like those systems you have to continue to review. Like, we're at a point now where the systems that we implemented when we're at the 200 mark no longer are efficient for us. So we're on this journey at the moment of reevaluating what our booking system is going to look like for next year and things like that, just so that we can continue to be efficient but continue to service our customers to the highest quality as well.
Yeah. You started off as this teenager in your garage that didn't even know how to teach, really.
Yeah.
How did you develop, A, your teaching skills, and B, your business skills? Because they're two completely different things.
Yeah. So with my teaching skills, so I did all the way through to like my grade 8 with my Amy B. So they're the music exams that you do nationally and that our kids do as well. So in terms of actual music skill, I would say the Amy B exams set up all of the like prac and theory elements. But I was always a working musician, so gigging in lots of different contexts, whether it be weddings, funerals, bands, musicals. I think I've always been proactive about maintaining my own music performing skill set and continuing to develop that as well, and setting different goals for myself in that regard as well. Like 2 years ago, all of my gigging goals were about improving my sight reading skills, whereas this year it's been far more about developing my ear-based playing and things like that, just so that I too am a continual learner. Continuing to do professional development as well. That is a massive thing for me. I always commit to that every single year in different regards, whether it be like there's a speech pathologist that I absolutely love who I do like vocal coursework with and things like that to develop my understanding of vocal anatomy and things like that, doing workshops. So I've been very proactive about continuing to keep my own skill set alive and expand my knowledge and content so that I can continue to bring fresh information back to the studio and things like that. So on the music front, that is sort of how I would say my music skill sets continue to develop. Business, It's a funny one because I definitely think that I'm so glad I did a law degree because there's lots of things I learnt. And then working in a law firm taught me heaps. And my old boss there was just a brilliant businessman. And I just used to even watch the way he did his client communication. And sometimes I make decisions and think, oh, that's what he would have done too, So he was a big influence in those early stages in terms of just me learning how to communicate to clients, which sounds like such a simple thing, but it's really not. It's a skill like anything else. I definitely think that my soft skills have developed over time just with practice. As I sort of mentioned, my fiance is a business owner himself. So
Shout out to Alex.
We talk a lot about business and how we can continue to improve. And I think he really is good at holding me accountable and being like, no, don't do that. Or like, we can be doing this better, or just sharing ideas. I think there's such power in sharing, but I'm a very big believer in business owners talking and sharing their experiences and sharing their struggles and stresses, but also their achievements as well, because I think by sharing, we learn collectively. And I'm very big on the podcast train at the moment. So I listen to so many different podcasts because I just think there's always more to learn and always better ways of doing things. And I just am always seeking out the most efficient way to train the team or to structure our lessons or whatever it may be. Just continual education, I think, is so important, because the minute you decide that you know it all, that's the time to stop teaching.
100%. In terms of in the business owner as well, right? Like, if you think you know everything about running a business, then you're so naive.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you have to understand that the skills that you might have are amazing, but if there's skills that you don't have, then either A, find that time to upskill and learn that yourself, or B, bring someone in your team that's going to help you with that.
Yeah.
And that was a big learning curve for me as well.
That's a big one too. Like, you don't have to be able to do it all.
Nor should you.
And like, there is benefit to adding different skill sets to your team and letting them add new and different ideas. Like, our team has grown substantially, and like, we've got marketing support now and admin support and accounting support. And I just think I don't know it all. And it's wonderful that I have staff members who are fantastic, who I can get different and new ideas from, because without them, we wouldn't continue with that growth.
Yeah. So from one in a garage being you, how many now in the business?
28.
28 staff members.
Yeah.
How many of them are teachers?
So all but 2 are teachers.
Wow, okay.
Yes. But it's sort of like we have some teachers who have been with us for a long time, some that come on new as casuals to be trained up, and some of our students, as they get older, we bring them on as teaching assistants so that they can teach group classes with me and learn and things like that. I'm very big on new teachers coming in initially as assistants so that they can really develop that skill set before they're put in the classroom with a student of their own. So there are different roles, I guess, within that 28. But yeah, it's crazy to think how much it's grown.
How do you manage a team of 28? I have a team of 4, and that's hard to manage sometimes. How do you manage a team of 28? What's some of your tips that you could give me and whoever's listening?
What are some tips? I feel like I'm still navigating it myself. I think it's really important to treat them like they're human and to really give them the time and space. And I really always aim to be open with my staff members and make them feel as comfortable as they can be coming to talk to me about everything and anything, because I think that creates an environment of support. I am continually asking them for feedback all the time. How can we improve? How can we better support you? What areas do you feel you need training on? We do training in every school holiday break, but at the end of them all, like we just did a training session last week, and the last question on the form is, where can we better help you? What do you feel like you need training on next? just so that they feel supported, because if they're feeling supported, they're more likely to come into work with confidence. That being said, I definitely feel like I'm still learning how to be a team manager.
Yeah.
I think this year has been a massive year of growth for me in that regard, because one of my teachers became a full-time staff member this year. And so managing teachers who are in a couple afternoons a week versus having someone in every day of the week is, again, a completely different experience.
Well, it's responsibility on you from obviously, making sure that they're looked after financially, but also are they actually being efficient in it for you to keep them employed too? Like, are they reaching KPIs? Like those kind of things. Like, but we go back to, we don't learn this stuff to be a business owner, but we throw around these words like KPIs and all these things. It's like, what the heck is that?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I've learned is coming to understand what each staff member has to offer that is unique to them, and building a team and building roles and responsibilities based on that. And I think that's been the mindset shift for me this year, that I don't need to have a team of 28 Alinas. It's actually wonderful that we have people from different backgrounds with different experience, with different skills to offer, because I can't do it all, but with a wonderful team behind me, there's a lot that we can achieve together and collectively.
Do you value building trust with your team more than anything else?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I definitely think as well, our team is a very close-knit team, and they're all we're all actively outperforming, and we all share such a passion for music, which I think really is a lovely uniting thing. And it means as well, like when you've got passionate musicians coming in, then that passion comes across in the classroom and in their interactions with one another. Like, I love my team to bits. They're absolutely wonderful, and we couldn't do what we do without them.
Yeah. All right, you're in this phase now. You've had it now for 5, 6...
It's been since we went like commercial and properly went at it, 4 or 5 years, something like that.
So very young. What's the next 5 years goal, do you reckon? Now that you're in it, you've got 2 studio spaces, you've moved a couple of times, you're both in Penrith and Springwood.
Yeah.
What is next for Alina W Music, as in the business?
Yeah.
And what do you think is next for you, Alina? Besides getting married soon, of course.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm very much in a headspace at the moment of working out where we go next. I think because the Springwood studio is so new, we've only had it since January, we've still got plenty more growth to do up there. So I'd like to continue to explore that. There's so much creativity in the mountains in particular. So I feel like there's more programs that we can introduce up there to cater to that community. I definitely would love to have more full-time staff members on the team. That's like a little goal of mine. I love that in an industry where full-time stable work is so hard to come by, it would be so wonderful if our workplace could be a place where these wonderful musicians are able to get that financial stability, just because I have always been told it's no money in music, don't do music. And if I can go, actually, no, like you can come and have a full-time job here, like teaching or,
and still gig,
and still gig and things like that. That's something I would love to be able to offer more musicians. That would be a long-term goal for us. But I just think that there's still so much more I'd love to do in terms of getting the students out performing and introducing more programs. Like we do the piano, singing, guitar in terms of private tuition, and then we've got several different strands of group singing. And I love the singing and the harmony work and the ensemble skills. And I have so many ideas on that front in terms of how we transform that into bigger performance opportunities for our kids. So I think more work on our programs and widening those opportunities is definitely something I'd like to do. But continuing to grow and continuing to give kids in Western Sydney the opportunity to access music education.
And what about you, Alina?
What about me? I don't know. I definitely think my goal is to have a little bit more like better balance in my life. Definitely at the moment, the work hours are nuts. But that's also because we're growing and I'm pushing and I'm committed to it.
Someone said to me once that the first 5 years of the business, get prepared to not have any downtime. That's the infant stage, right?
For sure. And we're definitely still young and new. So we've still got more growth yet to do. But I would like to have a bit more balance in terms of actually giving me more time to do a bit more of that performing stuff as well, because the balance is definitely lots more business and teaching than it is performing at the moment. Like I still gig basically every week. But I think a bit more balance. It would be nice to pick up a hobby or two. I don't have any hobbies. I don't do anything for fun.
Your hobbies are now become your job.
Yeah, my hobbies became my job. So it'd be nice to have a hobby. We just got a bunny. I love my bunny, Ollie. He's the cutest thing ever. I've discovered that I'm an animal person in the last few months, which is a bit random. But having more time to do some me things would probably be nice. I mean, that's the business owner goal, right? To have a bit of balance and flexibility. And hopefully we'll get there. But I think because I love what I do so much and so I'm so passionate about it. Like I was supposed to have this week off work for wedding planning stuff, and today I was doing work. Like I just can't help it because I love it so much. So balance, but for the sake of, I guess, my own health so that I don't go crazy. But yeah, we'll see.
What is it about music in general that is so important for children at a young age, and not talking about what we talked about before with, skills of achieving goals and things like that. But what do you think it is about music in general that really is so important for kids to learn or absorb?
It's so good for their brains, in terms of the work it does and the success it sets them up for from a schooling perspective too. And there's been a million studies done in that department. So it's good for their own learning and their own development. But I just think that it offers a few wonderful things. The first thing is that it gives kids the opportunity to express themselves in a different way. And often we see kids that come in that might be of different backgrounds, they might have different stories, they might have different needs, but for some reason music just clicks, like music just works and it's part of who they are. And if it gives them the opportunity or the vessel to express themselves or to achieve in a way that perhaps their schooling might not, it's just so wonderful to see that the confidence that can then flow on from that. I cannot tell you how many kids I have seen come through our doors who really struggle, whether it be socially, whether it be academically, but music clicks. For some reason, it's just because their brain is wired that way. And the way that can instill confidence and develop their self-esteem and develop their self-worth and their self-identity and give them some goals in terms of what they want to do as they grow. Well, like the kids that come in and say, I want to work for Alina W Music when I grow up because I love it so much. I'm like, yes. But it's just nice seeing them develop that confidence and that sense of identity where they may not have been able to do that elsewhere. And I think that's probably the number one reason I love it so much, because I just love seeing the way in which it can totally transform how they view themselves. Yeah. But I just think that music, even like there's been studies done that say that if you go and sing in a choir or sing in sort of group, like the effect it has on your brain and the happiness it instills and the benefits for your mental health. Like I don't think music is just about becoming a performer or developing a certain skill set. It's the social benefits, the mental health benefits. It introduces you to a different community, and I really felt like I found my people through music and the doors that opened in the communities that introduced me to and things like that. So I just think that it's so much more than just a skill. It's so much more than just an extracurricular thing. It really can open some wonderful doors.
Your passion for your business and for the education of children is just infectious, and it's really, if anyone's listening and watching, you can see it on you. And every time I see you, I'm so in awe of the young woman you've become from that 16-year-old that I met in West Side Story to this amazing business owner. And I truly mean this. Like, it is inspiring to see someone with such determination and such passion to want to achieve these goals, not only for yourself, but also for these young children that are coming in and educating them. And you honestly need to be so proud of what you've achieved.
Thank you.
And I cannot wait to see what the next 5 years, 10 years of Alina W Music and beyond, because I know it's going to change a lot of kids' lives. It's also just going to bring such a level of community and happiness to people, not only your staff, but the kids, the parents. So honestly, kudos.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
So thank you for joining me today. But before we go, we're going to do a little rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. We're going to be as quick as we can. All right, if you can be anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Here.
Good old Western Sydney.
Yes.
What a time to be here. Roll for 4. All right, if you could do anything else besides music and law, what would it be?
I'd love to work in marketing. I love marketing.
Favorite shape?
Circle.
No, these are random rapid fire questions. We get to you. Favorite album or artist?
Delta Goodrum. Love her to bits. That's why I wanted to be when I used to sit there as a 7-year-old singing and working out the notes on the piano, because she has this one song in her Innocent Eyes album that says, "Do you remember when you were 7?" And I'd sit there as a 7-year-old like, yeah, that's me, trying to play and sing these songs. How embarrassing.
That's amazing.
Delta Goodrum.
Favorite musical?
2, West Side Story and Moulin Rouge.
2 very different musicals.
Yes.
One classic, one modern.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And how can people find you, reach out?
Yeah, so we're Alina W Music on Facebook, on Instagram, www.alinawmusic.com.au. We're very active on the socials, but if you want to submit a form via our website or message us on Facebook or Instagram, you can find us there. But we're based in Penrith and Springwood.
And absolutely, you should definitely enroll your child there if you're Western Sydney, because honestly, they're going to learn so much from you and your staff. So thank you again, Alina, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe we'll chat another time and get further into talking about Alina W Music another time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alina, for joining me on the podcast today. I truly loved having you on, talking about how your business started from such a young age to now your growing, amazing school that just really is inspiring for a lot of business owners. And one key takeaway that was really highlighted in this episode, which I've always said, is systems and processes are really important in businesses to help nurture your growth, but also really help your clients. So thank you again, Alina, for joining me on the podcast. And for all those listening, I hope you have an awesome day. And if you want your child to learn music in Western Sydney, there is no better school than Alina W Music.